So there's 5 things that I'm going to look at today that really cover, like I said, the core things that have made, I think, our business successful. So we'll look at those. So one is knowing your product. This applies whether you're growing microgreens or mangoes or making pesto or baking bread. That's key. So sanitation, it's maybe going to drive some of you nuts. I know it's driven Curtis nuts a little bit. I talk a lot about sanitation. It's key. I talk a lot about systems, as I think a lot of folks in permaculture do. So that's something hopefully that isn't unfamiliar at all. Crop planning and tracking is crucial because we're doing it so much with microgreens in order to keep things efficient. And basically, no matter what you do, no matter how good of a grower you are, what it basically comes down to with microgreens, and I think a lot of these operations is just getting shit done. We're going to talk about 3 different types of laziness, actually, and we're going to see what kind of laziness that all you tend to have here. And we'll work through this together as a team. So the counseling services I offer for free. So before we go, how many people are producing microgreens now? Okay, good. How many people want to produce microgreens in the future? Okay, good. And then how many are really experienced microgreens growers and are going to just sort of silently judge me for the next 45 minutes? Good, okay, good. Okay, so it's good. It's good to know, what the experience of the group is. Anybody a microgreens grower from San Diego here? Okay, it's too bad. I was hoping we could go out and see some operations, but the nearest one I know is yours, Max, and you're 4 hours away, so. Okay, good. So let's get into things here. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about sort of the evolution of the Food Peddlers, which is the co-op that I'm part of, and give you a sense of where we started, where we are now, and that should actually give you a good sense of why I feel I should be up here talking to you. So my background is in small-scale farming. I'm from British Columbia, and I farmed for 7 years on Vancouver Island, which is just off the southern coast of British Columbia. And like a lot of folks in BC, I did my local farmers markets. I sold to restaurants. I did CSA stuff, a little bit of seed production, and just grew the typical mixed vegetable crops. And there's a big small-scale organic community on the island, so I got pretty engaged in that, and really it's where my agricultural skill set came from. Previous to that, I was a bartender, and I specialized in drinking all night. So this actually represented a very big life change for me, and I would say it was for the better most of the time. So this is a little permaculture example here. It looks like the 3 sisters, but it's actually 2 sisters and a distant cousin who's kind of camouflaged in the back, and there's a whole story about that. So can you guys see them there? Okay, go. Okay, so I'd been farming from about 2001 to 2007 on Vancouver Island on a small-scale farm, and in my last year of farming there, I wanted to introduce a new crop to our system. And like a lot of folks, I had grown sunflower shoots on a windowsill in my house. And I thought, well, if I can grow a good tray of this at home, why can't I grow 50 trays of it and take it to the market? There was nobody selling micros at the market. I knew it was a good crop, and I thought it would sell well. And for that season, we did. We grew lots, and they sold very well at the market. And then I left this farm. And what I did is I'd actually moved from Vancouver Island back to Vancouver to go back to school. I went to UBC to do an agroecology program there. And because I wanted to still keep my hands in the soil, I needed to come up with a system where I could farm in the city. And the spin model, which wasn't even really in existence then, of farming multiple plots just didn't work for me. I couldn't manage that. So I thought I'd scale up my sunflower sprout production. So because I was at UBC, I was able to do that as a directed studies project. So not only did I have a summer job, but I got 6 credits for it. And there was a number of things that I wanted to achieve with the system when I did it. So we'll talk more about this, but in BC, we treat microgreens as sprouts. So that means there's federal guidelines for growing these things, and I wanted to be able to take those guidelines and turn them into, be able to apply those on a small scale, which a lot of people don't want to do. I wanted it to be profitable. I wanted it to be physically easy. I was just sick of bending over. This whole system is designed so I just have to walk around like this. It's the greatest thing ever, actually. What else did I want to do? So the hygiene thing, which was part of the standards, the CFIA guidelines. And then the 5th one, and Curtis alluded to this a bit as well, I wanted it to be efficient enough so I could have a life. And after farming for 7 years on a small scale, doing plenty of 70-hour weeks, like that wears thin pretty quick. That's not really a lifestyle choice. That's a not dealing with childhood issues choice. So we can talk about that later as well. So yeah, so I developed this model at UBC in my first year there, and was fairly successful. I think I did $11,000 in sales, had $9,000 in expenses, growing one single crop, selling it at the farmer's market. So I believe I made $2.12 an hour that year. So it's not a bad start. So the next year, we moved to another site in the Strathcona neighborhood of Vancouver, fairly close to downtown. And at this point, I sort of grew the operation a little bit. Brought in more people to help out. We expanded our benching system, which was designed to be expanded. And we went from about $11,000 in that first year to about $35,000. And this is like a May to September growing season. So with the growing benches we used, it was very limited in that way, but it was enough for a summer job. I was a full-time student, and I had a newborn kid, so I didn't actually have a lot of time other than that summer period to grow. I had to put up with some jackassery by working with other people, but in the end that paid off because they had to put up with mine as well. So where things changed was I finished, this is the common problem, I finished my degree, I was like, oh, I have to get on with my life now. And the question then was, how do we expand this business? And the easiest way to expand what we were doing was to go from a summer operation into a year-round operation. At the same time, in terms of making the workload a little easier for myself and creating more of a team, we turned the business into a co-op. So I brought two of the staff that were working with me on as a co-op. We formed that. And like all good urban farmers do, we bought a shipping container. And then we proceeded to take that shipping container apart, which I get endless criticism for. On this interweb thing, where opinions mean everything, it's fantastic. So what we did is we bought a 40-foot shipping container. We worked with a guy who's a steel fabricator and a greenhouse builder to strip it down over 6 weeks, and then we rebuilt it. And what we wanted to do was put a lot of value on sunlight. So a lot of shipping container systems, they're enclosed, they have a lot of climate control measures in them. It's way too high tech for what we wanted to do. All we're doing here is we're actually building a greenhouse that we can pick up and put on a truck to move. One of the reasons is in urban agriculture, in urban farming, you need to build your infrastructure to be moved really easily because there's no security in land. And so a big part of the design was that. But the other thing is, we've got 320 square feet of growing space. It actually means I only have to heat 320 square feet of growing space. So it's actually a very, very efficient design. And with the shelving that we have in there, we're able to grow a lot of crops within there. So we went from selling $35,000 a year just through a summertime season, and then by building the container, we were able to go the next year up to $100,000 in sales. So that was our first year with the container. Our second year with the container, we jumped our sales up to $160,000, which was last year. And this year, our goal is to hit $200,000. So that's basically our gross revenue. Our expenses are very high, but at the same time, most of that goes into paying us as members to run the business. So this is where we're at now. Some of the benches that we used to grow in are still in use, but most of the stuff happens within the container there. We do use supplemental lighting in the winter and supplemental heat, but our general costs on that are fairly low. On top of that, we do all our transport still by bicycle, which in the beginning was a green thing, and now it's just the most efficient way to deliver stuff in the city. And I know, Curtis, you've talked about that a lot as well. I can't see us ever going to a vehicle delivery model, and more people are moving towards the bike delivery model in places like Vancouver. So, all right, so first part here is understanding the nature of your product. So like I said, that applies to anything. And there's 5 specific things we'll cover here with microgreens that are important. So the number one, and which is the most controversial, is treating microgreens as sprouts. So nobody wants to have this conversation. It's like, it's as if it makes growing microgreens this big complicated thing. And it does change your operation a little bit, but what it does is just means you have to have really, really tight sanitation controls. So there's 2 things we're looking at in sanitation. One is keeping your equipment clean, and the other one is keeping your seed clean. So sprouts are a high-risk product, and this is due to a number of pathogen outbreaks that have taken place all over the world, multiple times. Sprouts are grown in really, really good conditions for bacterial growth. And anybody know what the most likely source of contamination is in a sprout? The seeds. So we've talked before. So your seed is your most likely source. So if you're bringing in seed that might be contaminated and you put it into a system that's really, really good for breeding pathogens, you've got yourself a problem. So most systems are designed to deal with that anyways, but it's something to consider. So when we talk about sprouts and growing, I think it's actually where the term microgreen sort of split off from sprouts because people didn't want that association. So the reality is, in Canada, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency looks at microgreens as sprouts. My impression from talking with people in the US is the FDA considers them sprouts as well, though it varies by jurisdiction. When you get to be bigger, somebody's going to call them sprouts, and if they come and want to see your facility and you're not treating them like sprouts and somebody gets sick, you've got a problem. So I'm not going to dwell on that. It's a big point to talk about. I don't think it necessarily means things have to be that complicated. So there's a few things that we do to deal with that issue. So number one is know what your local regulations are. Different farmers markets have different requirements, different distributors have different requirements, and then your federal government is going to have stuff as well. Sprouts aren't regulated in Canada, but there's guidelines, and those guidelines are saying, well, you should probably do this, because if you don't and something happens, we're going to get on you. So we source seed specialized for sprouting, and that means a couple of things. So one, that seed was probably grown and handled in a way to limit possible contamination. And number two, when my company brings that seed in, they pathogen test it for us. So the seed's already been tested for pathogens, so when we bring it in, we're pretty much guaranteed it's a fairly clean seed. And then the third thing is having a sanitation plan, which includes your seed. So we go through a sanitation process with our seed. I know, Curtis, you talk a little bit about this in your book as well. I don't know if you go into this as well, Luke. And then the other thing is, the sanitation plan covers everything that we do. It's not just the seed, it's all our equipment as well. So we'll get more into that. Okay, so as it is with vegetable crops, you can't grow good quality seed without microgreens without good quality seed. And with some crops, there's a lot of variation in the seed. So with, say, we do pea shoots and we find our speckled pea is fairly consistent. We get a little bit of variation in our radish. But the one thing we have a lot of variation with is on our sunflower. Sometimes we get lots from Canada, sometimes they're from the US, sometimes they're from Israel, from Italy. And so every time that comes in, it's a very different crop. And we have a very intense system, and some seed does well in it, and some stuff doesn't. So we need to know what seed is going to work in our system. So there's a few things that I look at in terms of what I would call good quality seed. As I mentioned already, it's seed that's specialized for sprouting. So it's been pathogen tested, it's hopefully been grown and harvested with good agricultural practices, and you, once you get the seed, are storing it well and trying to avoid contamination. We're not a certified organic farm, but all the seed we buy is certified organic. You need a high germ rate, and one of the reasons for that, besides getting good value for your seed, is seed left on the soil surface is actually going to be more of a risk of disease. It's got to be vigorous and it's got to be uniform, especially with something like sunflower, where if you've got varying lengths, you're going to have varying maturity, which means you're going to have more hulls to pick. So these are things that seem like little details, but in the end make a big difference. And it has to perform well in your system. So when I buy seed, I ask a lot of questions before we buy it. And sometimes we love a seed and other growers can't stand it. And sometimes we can't stand a seed and the company will buy it back so they can sell it to other growers that really, really want it. So there's a lot of variation in there. So how you grow your sprouts is going to vary depending on, or is going to make a difference in terms of what seed works well for you. So I'm on a number of Facebook pages that talk about microgreens, and somebody posted this picture one day and said, I found this sunflower seed, it's bird seed. Do you guys think I could use it for sprouting? And even though it says clearly on the bag, not for human consumption, somebody thought it would still be a good idea. So why did they want to buy this seed? Because it was cheap. If you're going to spend any more, an excess amount of money on anything, it should be your seed in order to get good quality seed, whether it's for sprouting or for vegetable production. I was out talking to a farmer the other day in Chilliwack, just outside of Vancouver, And this farmer spends 5 times more than other farmers on cabbage seed, but he says he gets this cabbage seed, and it's so expensive they don't even list it in the catalogs, but he doesn't get any splitting on his cabbage, he doesn't have any of the problems that the other growers have, and his return is much higher because the seed performs so well in his system. So seed as an overall percentage of your cost is actually quite low. So if you're going to spend a little bit of extra money on something, it should probably be seed. So this one, yeah, this drives me nuts. This whole conversation was crazy. And if somebody gets sick buying this guy's sprouts and they trace that back to that, that's a big liability issue, especially in America. Okay, so things to do here. It's been a lot of talk about relationships here. Curtis, you talked about it. Both Eric and Javin were talking about it yesterday, and it's key. So we have a great relationship with our seed supplier. So we buy from one sprouting seed supplier in Canada called Mums. They're based in Saskatchewan. I call them up and order everything, in person. I ask lots of questions about the seed. They respond really well. We buy their seed a lot. We're really appreciative of that. And they make the effort to keep us in sort of the loop about what's going on with the seed. They love, since they love talking on the phone, but sometimes it's like, I gotta go. We've got some seed to pack. But it goes a long way having these relationships. It's really important. So going back to our sunflower, we will not buy sunflower until we've trialed it in our system. So whenever there's a new lot in, we buy a 10-kilogram bag, we plant it in varying densities in our system, and we try it out. So here we're testing a black oil seed against a white stripe seed to see what kind of results we can get. I had trialed a batch of sunflower once, and it trialed pretty good, and then we proceeded to buy a pallet load of it. And so one of the things I say is when you find a seed you like, buy lots of it, and so we tend to buy as much as we can at a time. So this is basically, 75 10-kilogram bags that we brought in, which is going to last, sort of a season and a half for us. So we had just purchased a pallet load of seed, planted it all out after doing our trials, waited 2 or 3 days to take a look how they were doing germinating, and then took a little peek under one of the trays, and there was this green mold over top of all the trays. And so we had just spent thousands of dollars on this seed and sort of questioning our system here at this point. And it was kind of my first panic moment, actually, like, I don't know what I'm doing. So we were able to control the disease for this first couple of weeks. And so what ended up happening, after a couple of weeks, the disease went away. And so what we kind of learned, even though we've got a fairly sanitary system, is our greenhouse is still an ecosystem. And as these new microbes get into the system, the rest of the microbes within the system are going to adapt and control that. And so we've had that with a number of crops since. We're going through it with cilantro right now. We were growing cilantro to try it out. We had lots of disease in the beginning, and then the disease just went away. And I don't know that we did things much differently. So over time, things tend to adapt to the system. So seed is tricky. So know what seed is consistent and know what seed is inconsistent so you're prepared when you're buying it. So microbes are very, very sensitive to changes in growing conditions. So there's 4 basic conditions that I think about in our growing system. Their temperature, their light, their humidity, and then there's a 4th one that's going to come to me in a second. Oh yes, airflow. So there's actually more things, like we could talk about, how long we soak the seed, or planting density, the depth of the soil, but these are sort of the key ones that change quite a bit based on the seasons. We have a lot of control over the other stuff. So our big challenge is in the summer, keeping the temperature down, and in the winter, bringing the temperature up. It's actually harder to make things cool than it is to warm them up. So in our greenhouse, we use remay in the front, and we'll put 55% shade cloth on the top to bring the temperature down. And in the winter, we've got electricity going all the time, and if we need to boost things up, we can use a propane heater. What we don't want is wildly fluctuating temperatures. We find by having an even temperature throughout the growing cycle, we're getting much better results. So we're doing lots of stuff, and we're exposed to the environment. So if you're growing indoors, you're going to have a lot more control over that, and so you shouldn't have as many problems. But because we're trying to utilize the big free solar system in the sky, that makes it a bit more of a challenge. Light is the same thing. So we're in a greenhouse, we get light all the time, but the light situation in Vancouver come this time of year is pretty bleak. It's very gray, it's very dark, the day length is short, so we use supplemental light over the winter. So we use high-pressure sodium lights. They're high in the blue spectrum, and we can adjust them from between 500 and 1,000 watts. The nice thing about this light is actually most of the energy that goes into them is creating heat. So I don't know if anybody recognizes these types of lights. They're used in other types of operations that stuff we grow in BC, and they're actually designed to remove heat from the system. So you would hook up hoses to them so you could draw the heat out, but we actually want that heat in our system to keep things warm. So yeah, we can supplement the light in the winter season in order to basically give the crop more energy.
Do you supplement light in the summer?
No, no. There's been a few times where we've sort of had like a pretty bad period where we'll put the lights on a little bit during the day to give them a little extra boost. But in general, from about mid-April to probably mid-September, they don't go on at all.
If you do that, you have to mitigate the heat?
If the lights are on, that means the heat's probably down as well. So even though it might be, say 20 degrees outside, but if it's a cloudy day, it's going to be 20 degrees in the greenhouse. So we get in the winter, we can have a day that's 2 degrees and sunny outside where it's 30 degrees in the greenhouse. It's the sun that heats it up directly. So as soon as there's cloud, we don't get that, yeah. And we do have very good airflow, and we have an extractor fan to move heat out as well. So when it hits a certain temperature, the fan will always go on. So yeah, we're always changing that, yeah. So yeah, so a lot of gray days, so we use the lights to supplement in that way. A lot of people are using fluorescent lights and LEDs. One reason we went this route, these are up and out of the way. And if we had lighting on every shelf, there's a lot of electrical combined with a lot of water. Not a great combination. I've had a few experiences with that. And the other thing is, because we're trying to utilize sunlight, those lights actually block the sunlight. So this allows us to keep this out of the way. All right. So the fourth thing is airflow. There's a number of things we do for airflow. Most importantly is fans. So I think in this, we've got about 11 fans in this small space. So a question I get from folks is, should I put a fan in my growing room? Well, you should put several fans in your growing room. So one thing they do is they keep the air circulating, but they're also keeping the air mixed. And so what we don't want is 35 degrees up here and 25 degrees down here. So we thought we wanted that so we could grow two different types of crops. We find it's a better system when the temperature is even throughout. And also, actually this is the humidity slide, but it's pretty much the same as the airflow slide. We have this is gonna vary with region as well. We have a dehumidifier running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, drawing humidity out of there. So you can see, so part of it's there's a lot of humidity in the air. The other thing is we're watering, there's transpiration and water evaporation happening on the soil. So we're trying to do everything we can to get moisture out of the system. So when this picture was taken, you can see there's still moisture on the floor. At the end of every crop production day, we will actually vacuum that up with a wet vac. So we remove as much water as we can manually, and that way the dehumidifier doesn't have to work so hard. They suck a lot of energy, so.
Is that a chemical, so it's not a chemical dehumidifier?
No, it is, yeah, it is electric, yeah.
So
yeah.
does that, in general circumstances, those type of dehumidifiers cool down the environment?
This one, no, it actually is what it does, like it's just recirculating the air, so it draws air in. It actually helps bring air up, it helps mix the air, but it's warm air that blows out of there, yeah. And then, yeah, airflow. This is the airflow picture. So yeah, we've got lots of fans. Generally in a greenhouse, you would circulate air this way, but because our shelving is on the sides, we circulate air this way. And this is one way that actually really helps us bring the heat down and then bring the cool air up. And yeah, our temperature difference from top to bottom is only about 1 or 2 degrees, which works really well for us. Okay. Oh yeah, so I kind of just covered all this stuff here.
Quick question, Chris.
Yeah.
Your lower levels of those shelving units, is a light up on the top, is that enough for them to?
Yep. So generally, so we used, if you noticed in Curtis's presentation, he had a lot of SketchUp models. So what we did is we used SketchUp to get a sense of our lights are here and our shelves are here. Where does our light hit? The top two shelves get the light fully. The bottom shelf is missing a little bit in the back. And all we do is on a daily basis, we rotate those trays. And so you get a little bit more stretch on that one side. And by rotating them every day, that evens out in the end. And in the summer, when you've got a lot of sunlight coming in, you don't get any of it at all. So we don't even see that effect. If we don't rotate a tray, you would get a tray that has a grow something like that very predominantly, but by rotating them, it's gone completely, yeah. We did design originally shelves that would come out and then you could push them back, so we could have actually fit another layer in there and upped our production. but they would have been very expensive because they were so customized. And at the time of designing this, we weren't sure how viable it was. And the shelving that we use in there, as you'll see again, it's standard restaurant, epoxy coated shelving. Finding a market for it afterwards wouldn't be too difficult. So what you want to do is control as many factors as possible. We control the heat, we can kind of control the cool. We might actually even have to put an air conditioner in this year because the summers just keep getting hotter and hotter in Vancouver. So we try to do as much stuff passively as we can. The dehumidifier, in some climates you might actually want to introduce a bit of humidity. I don't know what it would be like in a super dry climate. So that's key for us. And anticipating change. So I look at the forecast every day because our harvest date is static. It's Tuesday and Friday no matter what. But when I sow can change. And if we're predicting a real hot spell or a real cold spell, we can shorten or lengthen our growing cycle. So if that happens, I need to actually anticipate that. And if we're not sure where that's going to be, if we plant on a short cycle and we get cool weather and we don't accommodate for it, we can lose yield. And if we plant on a long cycle anticipating cold weather and it gets really warm, the crop grows too fast. And there's a very small window of optimum harvest for most microgreens. So, assuming you don't have total temperature control. If you've got a walk-in cooler you can stick stuff in, you were talking about harvesting arugula at the prime time. When they hit a certain point, if I could just take those all and pop them in a walk-in cooler, they'll just wait there until we harvest them, which is probably the next iteration of our model. Microgreens are easily damaged. When you go through the harvest process and the production process, you're handling them a lot. Two things damage does is, one, it shortens their shelf life, and they've got a reputation for having a short enough shelf life as it is. One of our big selling points is our stuff lasts so long, like twice as long as any of the competition we have can do. The other thing is it affects the presentation, and if you've got high-end restaurants on your client list, they're using your microgreens as a presentation piece, so they've got to look good on a plate. So if they're damaged, there's a lot of sort of impact from that. Simple, just be gentle. That's all you got to do. Okay, and then what's the last one here? I'm very, very sick, by the way, so I'm not totally on my game. So if I forget something, just let me know. And then storage. So microgreens are highly perishable. The CFIA guidelines say you must use within 1 week. It has to say that on the label. And most of our stuff we'll keep for a couple of weeks easily. But every few minutes they spend outside of a fridge shortens their lifespan. So our whole system is designed to move them through the harvest process and get them into basically packaging and refrigeration as quickly as possible. So because we put so much work or take so much pride in our storage life, that's number one priority for us. Our second priority is actually getting it out of our system and into our client system as quickly as possible. Most restaurants have way better storage facilities than we have. So we've got 2 fridges that can hold most of our product, and then a multitude of coolers which we pack with ice. And as soon as those coolers are ready to go for delivery, we take those off and deliver them right away. So that allows us to move the product very fast and allows us to just get done. To harvest one day and then deliver it the next day. We're kind of lazy, actually. So I'll talk about laziness a little bit later. So this works pretty well. In a typical harvest day, we'll start at 7 and we're done by 2 o'clock. So everything's harvested, delivered, all our wash up is done, and we're off. So it's not a big deal for us to be doing those deliveries afterwards. Okay. So you do need refrigeration. So you can maybe take beets and have them in a Rubbermaid in the back of your truck overnight before you take them to market, even though probably most people would still use a walk-in cooler. You need refrigeration. You absolutely need it for storage. The other thing is you need to maintain the cold chain. So having your stuff in a walk-in cooler and then taking it out into the warm summer air and keeping it out for several hours before selling it, that's not going to work for microgreens. And some suppliers will require not only that you bring it in a refrigerated vehicle, but you're monitoring your temperature. So if you're selling to a big supplier, if you're selling to Whole Foods, for example, they require you to document that stuff. So we're not quite at that scale yet, but we keep everything very, very cold all the time, and that's a lot of effort goes into that, so it takes time. Okay, so I just talked about this stuff. This is the summary slide. So this just has it. You can get this later, and this will just be the stuff that you need to remember afterwards. So, any questions on that in terms of the product stuff?
You said that sanitation is a big thing for you. Do you ever find yourself like cleaning your refrigeration areas? I mean, like you go through and
We
clean your
clean
fridges,
everything.
Like, every time product comes in, do you have cleanse?
Yeah, so the question is, thanks for the reminder. Question is, do we clean, as I mentioned, we're cleaning some stuff. Do we clean our refrigeration areas and other things? We clean everything. So after harvest, we clean all our harvest equipment. After our trays are harvested, we wash and sanitize those trays. And then things like our coolers and our fridges, we have on a regular cleaning cycle, a regular maintenance cycle. So that includes our fridges, our coolers, our floors. Anything that we use in production gets cleaned. So some stuff gets cleaned with every use. Other stuff gets cleaned on a regular basis. Yeah.
Same cleaning product?
Yep. So for a lot of our stuff, right now we're using bleach. It's quite effective, but we've used a bunch of different stuff over the ages, and I'm going to go through another process now to move over to peracetic acid. So peracetic acid is acetic acid and hydrogen peroxide. So it's kind of it's the new organic standard in Canada, actually. So that's where we're moving. You could do hydrogen peroxide on its own. There's a few cleaners you could use. Bleach is just really easy to access, and it's really effective. So it's why we tend to use that, and it's cheap.
What was your general cold temperature that you're looking for?
2 to 4 degrees. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Someone else can do the math, yeah. So it would be the same standard with any, if you're in a restaurant and you've got refrigeration, you've got to check that temperature and record it every day. It would be the same thing here, yeah.
What are good questions to ask the seed company?
What's the germination rate? What kind of feedback are you getting from other growers? What kind of debris is in there? How did they do in your tests? Like they'll often grow it out. And uniformity. The biggest thing for us is uniformity. I don't want some stuff that is that big and some stuff that is this big. We want everything to look perfect. If you can find certified organic hybrid seed, that the uniformity is great. I have yet to find good certified organic hybrid seed. All the good quality sunflower seed goes into the oil market, so it's hard to find a lot of good quality stuff for sprouting.
What kind of equipment do you use for harvesting?
A sharp knife. So that's our cutting mechanism. We don't cut a lot of stuff with scissors. Scissors tend to tear, and they'll shorten the life. I think I've got some pictures up there of the system, but different crops we harvest differently, but mostly just into different bins or different bins of water, into a drain bin, and then into a spinner to dry them if we need to.
So literally you just take the greens and then just cut it down like that?
Well, so we used to do it with a machete, and I should pull up that video. Now it's just you're doing several cuts per tray with a very, very sharp knife. Like you do want it very sharp. Yeah. Do you have a question?
Yeah, what was it? So you said that your product has a longer shelf life than your competition.
Yeah.
You said that keeping things cold right away as well as looks like drying is a big thing for you?
Yeah. Cold and dry. That's for anything. Yeah, basically. Yeah.
But those are the main things, just keeping it cold and dry.
Yeah, there's some other secrets, but you got to come to the workshop on Sunday to find those out. So how you grow them makes a difference as well. Yeah, and the time it takes from cutting to being in the fridge, all that stuff is a factor. Yeah. Do you have a question too? You're good? Okay, all right. Okay, let's move on. Oh, okay, sorry, go ahead.
What is the shelf life of the seeds themselves? Are they measured in refrigeration?
Didn't Dan answer this question? No, yeah, so the question is, what is this? I'll try to remember without the prompting. The question is, what are the shelf life of the seeds? So that depends, once again, it depends on the seed itself, and then the other thing is how you're storing it. So we've definitely seen in some of the seed we're not storing as well, the germination will go down quite significantly within a year, but if we can keep it cold and dry, it'll keep for several years. So we're generally buying seed on an ongoing basis, so we wouldn't hold on to it that long. But as I said, we'll buy a year and a half or 2 years worth of sunflower if we like it, and that we would try and store in optimum conditions. Yeah. So yeah, cold and dry is the key. Okay, so sanitation and hygiene. People just don't like to talk about this for some reason. I don't know why it is, and because they don't, I've become obsessed with it. And there's two aspects of it. So where it comes from with sprouts is the human pathogen aspect. We sell food to the public in the modern day. If somebody gets sick from eating your stuff and dies, you're fucked. Can we bleep that out? Is that okay? And it's probably worse in the US than in Canada. I don't know how it is. So like if you know there's sanitation measures and you know there's guidelines and you're not following them and somebody gets sick, it's like, I'm gonna open a restaurant, but we're not gonna get a dishwasher. We're just, we can't afford it, we're too small scale. That's not an option. And so this is part of designing your business for success, which I'll talk a little bit about tomorrow. This is just going to be the reality of having a successful, bigger scale business is people getting sick buying your product. And the other thing is crop pathogens. You've seen pictures of our system. If any microgreen system you've seen, they're very, very intensive. And it's the same thing with microgreens or ground crops. The more stuff you have within a given area, the higher your risk of disease is. Your airflow is very limited, and the chance of disease spreading is much, much easier. So here's the system I had in my living room at one time. I think this one's yours, Curtis? So, little shaggy greens there. So because they're so intensive, your risk of disease is very, very high. So we are neurotic about sanitation. And I was thinking about this morning. We probably spend more time cleaning stuff than we do actually growing our microgreens. We spend more time and more water washing stuff than we do watering the crop. It's just ridiculous. So these are just some different systems. This is one of the big sprouters on Vancouver Island. And you can see, like, here's when we're going through our germination stage, like, there's like 15 trays all together. If there's a little bit of disease in there, it's dark, it's warm, there's poor airflow, there's lots of food, there's good moisture. It's perfect breeding grounds. So sprouts are high-risk products because they're, the contamination could come in on the seed, and then they're grown in these really good conditions for pathogen growth. With microgreens, you're throwing soil into the mix. Now, soil can't be a contaminant now, could it? So it is something to consider. So sanitation, a big part of that is just keeping stuff, keeping disease down. We're very mindful of human pathogens in everything we do, but our biggest thing is we don't want to lose a crop. We're worried about our sprouts dying than people, to be honest. So yeah, we've got a big, thick production manual, and a whole part of that is sanitation. And we've got all these systems in there, and it's just basically, how we keep stuff clean. And we do, so number one, we do a lot of hand washing. It was a big revolution for us. Not only did we get a sink one year, a couple of years without a sink, God. We got a hot water heater, and then we got a paper towel dispenser. These things are awesome. And then we got a little soap dispenser, like the paper towel dispenser, like $60, and then the paper towels are like $3 a roll. $6 for a soap dispenser. I now have one in my bathroom at home. They're just these foam soap things. So this is key, and when I think about actually in the beginning we didn't do this, like I will wash my hands 15 or 20 times during a harvest. So anytime I go from harvest to taking a phone call to doing something else, every time I come back into that system, I'm washing my hands. We wear gloves during production. You get a tear in your glove, you take it off. We don't wear hairnets, but that's probably coming. So hand washing is key. Going back to things, so we wash and sanitize everything after use. So as soon as our crop is harvested and packed and out of the way, we start cleaning everything up. So we use warm soap and water, we sanitize everything, we rinse it, and then we lay it out to dry. So just it's like you would do in a restaurant. We're just cleaning up after we're done. And there's the trays as well. So having gone through that, because we're really intensive operation and everything's very tight, we also have to make sure we store stuff. So once we've actually sanitized it, it stays clean. There's no point washing and sanitizing things and then basically putting them in conditions where they're going to get contaminated again. And documenting. So this is a big thing. So we've been inspected by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. They just call up and they're like, we want to come see your operation. And we're like, I guess so. Damn. So luckily, I spent a whole winter growing microgreens in my living room once. I needed work that winter. I'm like, well, let's try this. And much to the chagrin of the woman who lives below me in my apartment building, it was a very successful operation. But if the inspector came by and said, I'd like to see your facility, I'd just be like, sorry, you can't do that. And that would be not good. So part of it is we've got a good facility, but we have to document stuff. So the equivalent is, when you go to a restaurant and you go into the bathroom and there's that last time the bathroom was checked checklist and there's a signature and a time and a date. We do that for all our sanitary stuff. So when we sanitize our seed, when we sanitize the floor in the greenhouse, when we clean our shelves, when we do all these things, But the way we make that easier, we actually do all the documenting on our phones. We just got a form and we just click, 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 and then it's stored in a spreadsheet. We don't have to think about it. So it actually makes it a lot easier. We tried having clipboards up all over the place, and it's a very humid environment, so all the papers will just start crinkling over time. So that allows us to use technology to make things a little more efficient. Within that, I'll also know who did and who didn't do their sanitation stuff, so we can follow up on that stuff very, very easily. Okay, I'm all about systems. I'm totally neurotic about them. I think a lot of the folks that are speaking here are probably neurotic about them. One of the reasons you're interested in permaculture maybe is because you're neurotic about them as well. There's just something about them that just makes everything so easy. So I don't mean to patronize you guys about what is a system, but in this setting, when I think about a system, it's like this specific set of tasks we're doing to get to a goal. And as you know, systems are very complex, and systems often exist within other systems, often exist within other systems. Now, the term we use in food production and food processing is standard operating procedure. So is this term used in the US as well? Yeah, so your SOPs. So we have a standard operating procedure for everything we do. And when I do a new task, and what happens is I'm doing something that's new, and then I've got like this, I've got something in my hand, I'm like, I don't know where to put this. So our system is sort of, there's a break in the system. So everything we do, it just basically makes us automatons. We're just basically robots doing repetitive tasks all the time. So what sucks about that is we're robots doing repetitive tasks all the time. But what's good about it is we're very efficient, and the more efficiently we get our work done, the quicker we can get on with our lives. But it also makes things very, very easy. And the easier things become, the less we need to think about them. And so we actually just spend a lot of time talking while we're doing our system because it's, everything is very automatic. So I'll show you a little bit of some of the systems we use. So this is our basic harvest setup when we're harvesting our sunflower. We cut them with the knife into the first rinse bin. We move them into another bin, which we give them a second rinse, and we can pick the hulls. They go into the third bin, which allows them to drain before going into the spinner, before getting packaged and weighed and put into the fridge. So everybody within systems like this, everybody knows within our team knows what they should do and when, and people can move to different stations within a system to get stuff done. So here we've got a cutting and bagging system when we're not washing and spinning these guys. Here was a system we were doing for radish for a while, and this system sucked really bad. Radish, just don't get them wet, and everything will be okay. So same thing. Like our setup all the time is the same. This is our rinse bin. This is our spinner. And the good thing about it is I can come in. I can come in late to work, or I can not come in at all, and I know that everybody's doing the same thing. And I'll talk about why that's important in a bit here. Everything gets weighed. We record that weight because we record everything that we possibly can. And then stuff gets packed into labeled bags and then put into the fridge. So there's a system for preparing our labels and putting them on the bags. There's a system for how we put stuff in the fridge and how we rotate that stock. There's a system for packing our coolers. It's a bit stupid. Systems for everything. I think I've got 4 reasons for needing systems here. The number one is all about efficiency. Like I notice when I'm doing a task that I've never done before, how slow it seems. And I like to get stuff done quick so I can either move on to the next thing I need to do, or I can go snowboarding, and that's becoming more and more of a priority these days, actually. So they're super efficient. When you've done a task the same way a number of times, after a while you can do it in your sleep. So think about, maybe the first time you tried to pick suckers off tomatoes, you're like, and then after a while you're just doing this because you've got a system, you've got a feel for it. So the other thing is systems make troubleshooting very easy. So when something goes wrong in our production system, I want to know where it went wrong. And so we will go step by step through the system to see where things might have gone wrong. If everybody's doing something different and stuff's going wrong all the time, I can't pin down where that problem came from. So we had a crop of wheatgrass we were looking at just the other day, and the germination just didn't look right. It was probably about 50% germination on seed that should have been really good quality, and so we all just stopped. And we're like, okay, what's going on here? So first of all, when was this crop sowed? And we know because we've got a label on the trays that tells us the sowing date. 2, who sowed that crop? And we knew because he was there, but otherwise we could check our records on our database to see who had done that. And then we go through, well, which bag did you get the seed from? Are you sure it's the spring wheat and not the winter wheat? Did you check the lot number? And it was good. He's like, yep, it was this, yeah, it was that. But he's like, it was an unopened bag, or it was an opened bag near the bottom of the bin. And so it might have just been this bag that's sort of been missed and missed and missed, and it's been down there for longer than it should have been, and so the seed quality has gone down. So to address the issue of storage, like this was in less than ideal storage conditions for longer than our system actually should have allowed it to be. So there's, number one, there's a gap in our system we've identified. So we've gone through that, and we had actually sowed the next batch of wheatgrass already. So we knew there was a good chance that the next batch we sowed, which was still in the germination stage, was from the same seed. So we did two things, because no matter what, I always do something. One is, the next batch that you sow, make sure you take it from a fresh bag. Let's just take that, take that one bag right out of the equation. And the second thing is, keep an eye on the other batch that was sowed, because if it has poor germination as well, and we know it's from that other same bag, we're just getting rid of that seed. So we're trying to find the source of the problem and then eliminate it so it doesn't happen again. And if seed is the problem, that seed just becomes compost. It's no good to us. Is there another reason for systems? Oh yeah, systems are easy to teach. For me to come, it's like, I need you to go harvest beets now. And then for someone to come, 3 hours later and still be working on it, it's like, you've done it all wrong. I want to tell them a very specific way to do things so it gets done properly. So we actually, so like I said, we have standard operating procedures for everything. A lot of that is written, but a lot of it we do in video as well. So the nice thing about this, and a lot of people don't like written procedures, writing the procedures themselves is a good way to get to know your process. And every time I write them out, I'm like, oh yeah, that's not going to work actually. So going through that process is quite good. I'm doing more and more stuff through video than written, because it's just, I'm just sick of typing. So the videos just make it easy, and I think people see stuff visually and experience it better than they do when they're reading something. And we're always looking at our system. So if something starts to feel sloppy or taking too long, we make sure we're reviewing them to make sure we've got them optimized. How am I doing time-wise?
15 minutes.
Okay, good. Okay, so what's an interesting thing, there's this whole conversation around crop planning at the beginning of the season. So if you're going to grow microgreens, just get over that. You are crop planning every week. And so the reason is, conditions are changing all the time. If you're using a greenhouse, your weather's changing, and your market is changing all the time. So microgreens are a niche crop. People don't necessarily want them all the time, like they might want your beets or something. So our production changes every week. So we've got a very limited amount of space in our system, and we want to maximize use of that space. But there's also a cost for producing every single tray. So if I can't sell a tray, I don't want to grow it. So we have a big, and this is like the worst slide ever to show a screenshot of a spreadsheet. I know this is wrong, but I'm going to do it anyways, and I know some of you can appreciate it. I have spent a measurable portion of my adult life looking at these 4 colors here. Every week, going through each of our clients, all of our crops, and reviewing. So if somebody comes in, I need to cancel my order next week, I need to update the spreadsheet. We got a new customer on, we need to update the spreadsheet. We're going through that all the time. So what it does is as I update that, it tells me how much I need to harvest for that harvest. And because I generally know the average yield per crop, it calculates for me how many trays I need to sow. So when it comes to sowing time, every week, that number is just a little bit different. So we're always looking to find, what's that sweet spot? So we're sowing enough trays to make sure we've got our market met. We've got a few extra trays in case we get extra orders. And yeah, our rule now is we never short ourselves. So we used to run this really, really tight. So we were harvesting the last tray and packing our last bag. Don't do that. Because what happens is if you get a little cold spell and your production goes down, you're deciding who not to take a delivery to. So we would rather overproduce and compost our product than to short our customers. The loss is much, much bigger if you can't provide to a customer. So our goal is to have everything really tight. And so the way we've dealt with this now is we have a little bit of waste, but we actually, I'll get the spreadsheet off the screen there. What we do now is we actually harvest our extra crop, and we've got a women's shelter that takes it. So one thing we don't want to do is compost fresh food. You see these signs up, like 40% of the world's fresh food just gets composted right away. It's like, I don't think we really want to be a part of that. So what we do is we give ourselves a bit of buffer with each crop, so we keep a little bit on hand in case somebody needs some more, and then the rest will go to this women's shelter. We used to take it to a community center, then they started buying stuff off us. It's like, oh, that sucks, but it's great. So what to do? So, this has been drilled into you. You're going to get a lot more of it from Dan tomorrow and from Curtis in his workshop. We're using technology for planning a lot. We use our phones for stuff, and then we use spreadsheets for our crop planning, but we're doing it on a weekly basis. Now, we're always testing the model. So sometimes we're like, why do we have 18 trays of wheatgrass when we have 9 sales? Like, sometimes the model gets off, so we've got to review it. Like, yield goes down or yield goes up, and we haven't accounted for things that way. So we're always testing it to make sure we're producing optimally. And basically record as much information as you can tolerate. So we used to record everything, like when you swept the floor and when you turned on the lights and when you sneezed, and it was like, So now we've basically broken it down to what is the stuff we need to know. We need to know how many trays, we need to know how much we harvested from those trays. We're recording where they went through our invoicing system. We record all our sanitation when we uncover stuff, but some of the other stuff, watering, when the dehumidifier turned on, you don't really need to know that stuff, I don't think, unless you have a specific purpose. So, okay. Now really, it all comes down to getting shit done. And so I have some laziness genes in me, I've learned over time, and I'm going to just put a pretty sunflower picture up there so we can all be bright here. So what I've learned from watching other farmers is I used to think that they had this great connection to the plants, that they understood photosynthesis better than me, that they understood how the water got absorbed through the roots and then transpired out through the stomata. It's like, wow, how do they know all that stuff and how do they apply it? And they don't. They pay attention. And when something needs to be responded to, they respond to it. And it's so simple. And I think this is probably where your success comes from, Curtis. You just do stuff, right? I talk a lot about microgreens way too much, and people always have these ideas about them. I'm actually really not interested in people's ideas. I've heard so many, and I've had so many ideas. It's really what you do to bring those ideas to fruition that are going to make the difference. And so the same thing with your production system, If something's not growing, something's not working, you need to do something to change that. Either you need to do it right then, or you need to change something for your next batch. So there's 3 types of laziness that I've identified, and I'm kind of curious where y'all fit in here. So number 1 is just like, I'm lazy. I know there's stuff to do, but I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to go play volleyball. The other kind is there's something that really needs my attention, but I don't want to deal with it, so I'm going to ignore it and hope it goes away. This one I call head in the sand. So the third one, and this is me, is I don't know how to deal with that one, so I'm not going to do it. So this is called, what is that one called? No, well, it's avoidance, that's a whole other counseling issue. It's totally slipping my mind right now. No, it's cleverer than that. Sorry, I'm having a blank. So this stuff's important because I'm going back to Javin's talk, right? Like, Javin's talk has actually been the most profound thing I've heard here so far, and I think probably will. I'm really interested in systems and agriculture and food security and all this stuff, but what I'm most interested in is what goes on in here and why it goes on and where my beliefs come from. And through growing microgreens somehow, I've got a good sense of where all my sort of weaknesses are and those things that cause me to not take action in life. And now we're getting off on philosophy here, but I won't be off long. But I see it all the time in agriculture where people just don't take action. And so the key thing is really, like, I can tell you a system, but unless you follow the system, it's not going to work. I can give you a marketing plan, but unless you execute that marketing plan, it's not going to work. And the farmers I see who are the most successful are the ones that just get shit done. So when you think about that, when Curtis tells you, you need to pull those greens out and compost that bed and plant right away, well, you have to do that, or you're not going to get the numbers that are required in order to make your business profitable. If you need to drum up more business, and I say you need to make at least 3 contacts a week with new restaurants, if you don't do that, you're not going to make contact with any restaurants. So if you do nothing, that's what's going to happen. So my rule of thumb is, when you don't know what to do something anyways. And generally through doing something, you'll figure out what to do. So that's really key. So no matter all the rest of the stuff you hear, from me and through the rest of the weekend, the key thing is just getting stuff done, responding to your environment. So I think that's it for me. There's a few more pictures up there, and if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to go into questions as well.
I know on the days you harvest, you said that the days are like 7 to 2 or 3 o'clock. What on the other days, how many hours you guys put in?
So it depends on how we structure things. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna remember one of these days. So I was saying I do about 7 hours, 7 to 2 on a harvest day, and the question is, what happens on the other days? So our other days are generally like sowing days or prep days or a farmer's market day. So some of those days, like Wednesdays and Sundays, there's an hour of work that goes in, maybe 2 hours of work that goes into our system. Mondays and Thursdays are our prep days, and usually 2 people can do that in about 4 or 5 hours. And then Wednesday's sort of a variable day that's anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. So this system, like I mentioned earlier, like the system is designed to be easy. There's 3 of us working full-time and actually there's probably only 2 people working full-time right now and 2 part-time people. 2 people could run this business on their own fairly easily if that's the lifestyle they wanted. Like I don't want that, and none of my co-op partners do. We all want the flexibility. So it's designed to be very, very efficient. But the off harvest days, 2 people can do them in 4 or 5 hours. Yep.
Hey Chris, just real personal, I guess, last when I was at your place, you were trying some shelving fluorescence. What happened? You sort of alluded to an electrical.
No, so we did, yeah, so we did. We were having trouble with our pea shoots. We weren't getting our peas to leaf out. We wanted to give them some extra lighting to see if that would do the trick. So what we did is we put them down there. We made sure that the cords came up in behind and were away from the water, and then we put a piece of coroplast over top as well. So generally, when we put our trays on the shelving, we put them really, really close together, and then we actually water in a way so we're not over-watering in general. So yeah, we did have them in there. I don't know what we did differently, but we don't need them anymore. Yeah, we don't do it. Yeah, we figured out. I don't know what we figured out, but the peas now leaf out, so.
What software do you use for the checklist on your phone?
Google Forms. Yeah, so it just click, 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 and it just puts it into a spreadsheet for you, and you're done, yeah.
And then for the restaurants, you said, I know we were talking last night, you said you always want to have new clients or potential clients. Like how much time a week do you allow?
Not enough, I have to say. Like I'm into growing. I'm not into marketing, but collectively we're working on that. So it depends on the strategy. So we do a lot of emails, a lot of social media to reach out to restaurants. And as soon as we get contact, our general strategy used to be just bring them a sample. And that worked okay. Now our strategy is bring them to the site. I can take you a bag of sunflower shoots and you can be impressed by them, but you won't be nearly as impressed, especially on a cold February day, to come into our greenhouse and see how we grow stuff in Strathcona and deliver it by bike. So that's our strategy. So that's taking more time, but as soon as I've got somebody in that greenhouse, they're a customer. Yeah. So, and generally samples go a long way as well, but they're used to that. It's like, hey, we grow microgreens. Oh, that's so cute. So getting them into the system and seeing. We'll say, we're a local urban farm that distributes by bike. And so literally, you can kind of see there's this like, that's great, we'll see. But when they come and see the system, they're like, oh, like actually maybe you're an urban farm, but you're obviously at a big scale here. You guys know what you're doing. I think there's some reliability issues that chefs have had with urban farms in the past in Vancouver. And so they've got an association. So yeah, getting them in and then showing them our system goes a long, long way. More time, but more payoff. So we purchase our soil. The question is, how do we do our soil in terms of purchasing and recycling? So we buy our soil pre-made. So I worked with a company to basically formulate a soil based on some mixes they already had. So we took a look at what the qualities we needed were, what each of the components was. It was a bit scientific, to be honest, but it paid off because we got a good soil mix right off the bat. So they mix and deliver that when we need it. When we're finished, we take the mats and we compost them, but then everything goes off-site. We don't reuse any of our soil. So if we want to reuse our soil, we need to be able to thermophilically compost that. And in order to do that, we need to bring in an external nitrogen source, we need a tractor, and then we need to test that compost. And if it comes back positive for a pathogen, we can't use it anyways. So, and that came by, we actually had done a big batch, we made some nice compost, but we sent it to the lab and it came back positive for Listeria mono. And Listeria mono is not something you want in your growing system. So we're just like, so we retested in all the same spots and additional spots, and it came back for a benign Listeria species, but we're like, we're not taking the chance, we can't do that. It would actually cost us more money in labor and rentals and time and energy to reuse the soil than it does to just basically buy it in all the time. And so what happens, we're close to a couple community gardens, they come and take our soil away, wheelbarrow by wheelbarrow load. Yeah, so some farmers will come and take it as a potting mix. We would use it if we had space to use it in, but our ground is gravel, like we're not on a farm site, we're on basically industrial land. So we have no use for it, so it basically goes off site. So it does get reused. If I was growing microgreens within a farm system, I would just take those mats and use them. I would use them as a mulch, or once they're broken down, I would put those into the soil to be reused, yeah. So it does get reused, but just not by us, yeah.
Like, if you love chickens,
Yep. We've had a few people use them for the chickens, and that's worked well too. Yeah. All right. Anything else? Hey.
2 questions. What is
You're only allowed one question at a time. I know you're good. You're good.
cost per seed? And do you just have one greenhouse?
Yeah. So what you're saying? What is the cost for seed? So that varies. So I know for sunflower right now we're paying about maybe $60 for a 10 kilogram bag. But that bird seed, he was probably getting it for like $10 a 10 kilogram bag. And then always, the other thing to think about with seeds is you're also going to be paying for freight. But seed prices vary. So I bought a big bag of Triton seed, which cost me about $120. And then I bought a big bag of red daikon seed, which costs me $800. So it really depends on the seed and even within the same type of crop. And that'll depend on how specialized it is and things like that.
Do you price your sprouts appropriately or micro?
So we actually don't. So most of them are actually work out to about the same. Some of the seed is cheaper, but you need more seed per tray. The exception is radish, which is the seed's a little more expensive and the yield is a little lower, which we should technically, if we wanted to be super strict about it, have a much higher price. But we're just we grow them, we sell them by the pound, and this is the price per pound for everything. If our radish sales actually started going up, that it was taking up a significantly more space, then we might put up that price. The way it works out now, things tend to even out fairly easily, and it's an easy crop for us to harvest and pack and grow, so that labor that goes into it is less. So in the end, it ends up being probably about the same. Yeah, and we know for each crop we have what the seed, soil, and all the costs go into that, so we know our sort of cost per tray, and that does vary a bit, but not a lot. It's still only between, say, $2 and $4 for a tray.
You have one.
So we just have one shipping container greenhouse. We have, so some of the growing benches that I showed earlier that we used to grow in, we have a couple of those, so we can use those a little bit in the summer and winter. So in the winter, what we do is we take trays that, if our yield was better than our projections and we end up having extra trays, we can put them outside in these growing benches in the cold, and that'll kind of stop their growth. And in the summer, when our production goes up, we'll often use those as a little bit of extra space. Yeah, we couldn't fit another greenhouse on our site, unfortunately. We're at max.
So to double your profit this year, that's your goal?
No, we want to go from 160 to 200. So yeah, it's not, but.
You weren't using your full space before, or you think you can reach out?
Oh yeah, so we could produce on paper $250,000 within that space for sure. It just once again, like, we have to sell everything that we grow, right? And often, you take $700 of sprouts to the market and you sell $300 because it's raining, or you've got a restaurant that's like, oh yeah, we don't need that 15 pounds anymore. So there's all this fluctuation that happens, which is why you're always looking for new customers. So yeah, we're always looking to maximize that, but it's basically, we have to grow everything we sell for those numbers to evolve. What's the question over here? Yeah.
Which watering methods do you use?
We hand water. So interestingly, with the benches outdoors, we had, the question is, what watering method do we use? And I didn't even repeat that question, sorry. I'm just not gonna remember anything today, Max, I'm sorry. So in our outdoor benches, we used to use a mist system to water things, and that was great. The reason we don't use a mist system in the greenhouse is because it would come on at times when we're not there. And when I was talking about humidity earlier, like, we come in, we do our harvest, one person goes off and does all the crop work in the greenhouse, they get the trays out, they clean up, they water, and then afterwards, any water that's on the floor gets vacuumed up. So if that mist system goes on in the middle of the night or whatever time, it's going to really increase the humidity, and a lot of that moisture is going to sit on the floor. So all that's going to happen is, as the dehumidifier pulls the humidity out of the air, it's just going to evaporate from the floor. So we can actually pretty efficiently hand water. And the nice thing about hand watering on this scale, like if you're running a farm and growing ground crops, you do not hand water. You just don't do it. But I get to look at every single tray multiple times during a growing cycle. So if there's a problem, we catch it right away. We're growing our radish on an 8-day cycle right now and everything else on a 9-day cycle. If I don't catch something right away, there's no recovering, even if you're off on a half day with something. So that allows us just to be on top of things all the time and gets people really sort of intimately knowledgeable about the crops. So it does go a long way. All right. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, Wes and then Luke. What are you asking me questions for? Don't you know this shit already? Okay, I like trick questions, all right.
I got 3 questions.
Yeah.
I forgot mine. Go ahead, Luke.
Okay, so he forgot his question. Just when I remembered to repeat the question. All right, okay. Oh God. Okay, well, I'm around. If people want to talk to me, okay, now you remember your question? God, okay, yeah.
Do you have any, I know you've got a workshop on Sunday
Yeah.
here. Do you have any education platform online, or do you do anything like that?
Yeah, so the question is, do I do any other online training and education stuff? So the workshop I'm going to give on Sunday, I have an online version, so you can basically see the PowerPoint with me basically going through that. And so a lot of folks use that as a good start. It'll be the same material, but obviously in the in-person workshop, we'll go through a lot more, we'll have all the questions and whatnot. Yeah, so that's available online, yeah.
How often do you water? Is it just once a day? Is there a certain time of day that's better to reduce humidity?
So that depends on the time of year. Right now, some crops we can water every 2 days because it's just, we're controlling the temperature completely. Sometimes in the summer, so varying crops, sunflower is a water hog. In the summer, sometimes we're watering sunflower twice a day. It takes up so much water. So it really depends on temperature. Ideally, we're trying to water as little as possible to keep moisture off the crop and also humidity and time. But yeah, in the summer, we're watering a lot. So it varies with each crop, and we just monitor it on a day-to-day basis. In terms of time, ideally, we would, there's not really an ideal time, the different times a day. We water when we're there. What we don't want, and we've looked at different things, is I don't want to have to come into the site just to water. So I don't want to, break up my day to come in to do half an hour of work on a day that we don't have a production piece. So in order to make our sort of lighter days, like our Wednesdays and Thursdays, easier, we actually water heavily on Tuesday and water heavily on Saturday to give them a bit of a lag there. So yeah, so once again, that's really specific to our system. Like if you have microgreens integrated into your farm and other stuff going on and you're there, you would do that a little bit differently. But yeah, so this time of year, once a day is usually fine. In the summer, you're maybe 1.5 to 2 times a day, depending on the crop.
If you overwater, that would create a lot more bacteria.
Yeah, so overwatering, I'm going to remember to repeat. So the question now is about overwatering. So I do my best to avoid overwatering for sure. What you don't want is a saturated soil all the time. So there's a strategy we use. So if we get our growing cycle off and we need to slow a crop down, we just stop watering it. And a lot of the crops will wilt and look like they're going to die. We water them, they just come right back. So what we'll do in that case is we'll saturate it in order to make sure the soil gets really, really wet. Because when you dry out a soil, it becomes very hydrophobic and it takes a long time to get water back in there. So yeah, we have different techniques. And with the sunflower, we'll often purposely let it get to a bit of a wilt because it really, really changes the characteristics of it. And it gives it a really, really nice nutty flavor, it puts a little bit of redness in the stem and gives it some more crunch. So yeah, we do play with water in order to change the qualities of the crop as well. All right. Okay, well, thanks, everyone. Yeah.